Good night. I had a break and I had my dinner. I always have everything late. I'm now going to record. We are on Wednesday, the 10th of September. It's the birthday of the little twins who are 6 today. They live in Bristol. They're my friend's granddaughters. I'm like another nana to them. And she sent me lovely pictures of them. I can't waste time. I've only got 15 minutes. So I'm going to share what I can of a reflection of what I've already uploaded. Today's liturgical readings for today in ordinary time. So I won't begin with prayers or anything like that. I just want to begin the recording and the reflection. I always prepare them all together, as I've always done. And there was a wonderful saint as well. So this is Wednesday, 23rd week in ordinary time, year 1, and my eyes are tired. Luke 6, verses 20 to 26. It seems rather strange to our ears that Jesus should declare the poor, the hungry, and those who weep happy or blessed. And surely it makes more sense to declare them unfortunate or miserable. So often what Jesus says seems to go against how we would normally think. I don't know if any of you have been poor, but I have. I cannot say that it's happy to be hungry. Yes, it's unfortunate, it's miserable at times, but I couldn't use those words that Jesus used. But he has another meaning, I think. He prompts us to think again, to begin to see things from his point of view, from God's point of view. And I'd say in one line before I continue is that it's because God wants us to depend on him. I understand that completely, because we had to, for those 6 years in the bush together, we had to depend on God alone. So I will continue with the thoughts in this gospel. In today's gospel reading, Jesus does not declare the poor blessed because of their poverty, or the hungry blessed because of their hunger. Jesus declares them blessed in virtue of the promises that God makes to them. They will receive the kingdom, they will be satisfied, they will laugh. God intends that their present condition will be reversed, and God will see to it that it is, and that is why they are blessed. When is this reversal to happen? There's a lot of poverty, even in England now, for the people lower down the scale. There are hungry people in England. The teaching of Jesus in Luke's Gospel makes it clear that this reversal should begin to happen here and now, in the present. God's vision should not have to wait until the next life before it comes to pass. Lazarus should not have had to wait until after death to be fed. The church, the family of disciples, is called to work for the coming of God's just vision today. We are to become more fully people through whom God's great promises to those in greatest need will begin to come to pass in this earthly life. We've not reached many minutes, so what I plan to do, continue and do the saint of the day until I believe I have to stop, and if I miss the rest of it, I'll have to do that bit again separately. So today, September the 10th, is a wonderful, wonderful saint. Saint Peter Claver, S.J. Peter was a Catalan Jesuit missionary who worked in Colombia, South America, at the height of the slave trade. He befriended and baptized some over 300,000 African slaves over a 40-year period. He died on 8th of September 1654, and actually Paul Hurley tells his extraordinary story. Peter called himself Aethoporum Servus, slave of the Africans. He dedicated himself completely to their welfare. Slave of the Negroes for all time, the Spanish Council of Tarragona in 1727 named him Apostle of the West Indies, and Father James Broderick, the Jesuit historian, described him as a fusion in one man of the Cure de Ars St. Francis Xavier and Father St. Damien de Verster. He was born in Verdun. There is a plaque in a small room now at a chapel in a house in the Catalan village of Verdun, which is about 50 miles from Barcelona, and it reads, "Here St. Peter Claver, Apostle of the Negroes, was born in 1580. He was the youngest of 3 boys and a girl whose father had a small farm nearby. When he was 13, his mother and one of his brothers died. Within a few days, soon afterwards, his father married again. Couldn't do without someone to look after the children and stuff, I suppose. And when his second wife died, he married a 3rd time. But at 16, Peter left home for good, going first to Barcelona to study for 3 years, joined the Jesuit slave trade. In 1602, he joined the Jesuits at Tarragona, and 3 years later he was sent to study philosophy at a Jesuit college in Palma on the island of Majorca. Here he met the man who had the greatest influence on his life, Brother Alphonsus Rodriguez, who was then 80, while Peter was only 25. Alphonsus became his best friend and spiritual director, or, as he said, my saintly master, as he called him. It was the old brother who encouraged the young student to go as a missionary to South America. From Palma, Peter Claver went back to Barcelona to study theology for 2 years. Then, in 1610, he was among a group of Jesuits who sailed in a 300-ton galleon on a 5-month voyage to the West Indies. After arriving at Cartagena on the Caribbean coast of what is now Colombia, Claver was sent to Bogota, to the capital. He was told to finish his theology studies here, though he now wanted to be a brother. In 1616 he was ordained a priest at the age of 36 in Cartagena. So the slave trade, because of its splendid harbour, Cartagena was then the centre of the lucrative slave trade in Spanish America. Here Claver met another Jesuit father, Alphonsus Sandoval, who also greatly influenced him. Sandoval had already spent 40 years helping the slaves, and when he was transferred to another mission, he urged Claver to continue his work in Cartagena. For 400 years, starting in the 16th century, Britain and France especially, but also Holland, Spain and Portugal, transported about 15 million Africans as slaves to work. Excuse me, I have a bad cold. To work in the mines and plantations of their American colonies. From 1680 to 1786, Britain alone shipped 2,130,000 African slaves to America. This vile trade was eventually abolished by France in 1818, by Spain in 1820, and by Britain in 1833, typical to drag their feet. 10,000 slaves arrived in every year. In Claver's time, about 10,000 slaves arrived in Cartagena every year. They came from some 40 areas in Africa, mostly from Angola, where they were bought for 1 or 2 reals and then sold up to 200 reals. Each in Cartagena was a big business, like the arms trade or the pop music or pornographic industries or drugs today. About 400 black men and women arrived in each small sailing ship, Father Sandoval reported. Usually a third of them die during the 2-month voyage from Africa. They come with rings around their necks and their feet, joined by fetters in pairs, so that they are chained from head to feet. No Spaniard stays long down in the dark hold of the ships, where the Negroes are imprisoned, without the risk of serious illness from the stench, overcrowding and misery of the place, and where all kinds of diseases soon spread. Once a day they are fed a platter of flour or raw millet and a jug of water. They get plenty of beatings and whippings. With this treatment they arrive like skeletons. They're taken from the ships naked and placed in a great yard. There come endless crowds of people, some to buy slaves, others from curiosity, and a few from compassion. Claver and his medicines, food and drink. Claver organised his work thoroughly with Brother Nicholas Gonzalez, his assistant, for 22 years. And first biography, he had a team of 9 Negro interpreters who spoke various African languages. Claver learned Congolese. Whenever a slave ship arrived, he went to the port with medicines, food and drink. He went down into the hell below the decks where no other white man would venture. He washed and dressed the slaves' horrible wounds. He fed them with food he had begged in the city. He baptized the dying and comforted the weary who had suffered beatings and were homesick. I have to stop there or just reduce it to see what time that is. It's 12:14. I can just continue a bit more then. I'm getting very upset reading this. 6 slaves and local hospital. When the slaves came ashore, he carried the sick and wounded in his arms to a hospital or camp where he gave them clothes and more medicine and food. He used his own cloak as a veil to hide their leprous wounds, as a pall for those who died. It soon became as famous as its owner, for its very touch often cured the sick, and after his death men fought to tear pieces from it as relics. Visiting the slaves, only after the slaves were packed into yards to await their sale, and where conditions were often worse than on board the ships, it was only then that Claver's real work began. Here he patiently instructed them, partly by means of pictures, and baptized them by the 1,000. He did all this not because he liked doing it, but for the love of God. But he did much more. He travelled from village to village, across mountains and swamps to visit the slaves, giving them religious instruction every year. In Cartagena he regularly visited the prisons and prisoners about to be executed. He brought all the slaves of the city and surroundings to the Jesuit church, where he tolerated no segregation. In fact, he always gave precedence to the slaves who were admitted to confession first. "My confessional is too narrow for hoop petticoats," he told the Spanish ladies who sought him and complained of the smell of the African slaves in the church. On his less busy days, he went to the wealthier area of Cartagena to beg for food and clothes. Physical profile? Peter Claver was of medium height, with a long, thin face, an aquiline nose, large eyes and mouth, a dark complexion and a beard flecked with grey. His expression was usually sad, and his head bent down. He wore an old threadbare cassock and carried a staff surmounted by a cross. He dressed like a beggar, wearing old clothes rejected by others, wrote his biographer, Father Andrade S.J. His nights consisted consisted of 5 hours of prayer and 3 hours of sleep. He meditated regularly on Christ's passion, and he practiced extreme mortifications. His only hobby was that he loved music. Routine reports about him sent to Rome by his Jesuit superiors, red dated 1616, mental powers less than mediocre, judgment mediocre, prudence lacking and dated 1651, advance in spiritual matters excellent. One superior described him as a Catalan, pig-headed and difficult. Father Valentierus S.J., his best biographer, wrote he rarely smiled. The dreadful human wretchedness which he witnessed, the cruelty of the slave traders, the desolation of the hospitals, all this added to his own strained physical powers. His lack of sleep and his penances brought about the general sadness which was the background to his life. Sadness in him was the fruit of an immense love for a God he saw rejected. He had 3 intimate Jesuit friends, brother now St. Alphonsus, Father Sandoval and Brother Nicholas. 9 Jesuits died from the plague which struck Cartagena in 1650. Claver never fully recovered from it and was paralysed and confined to bed for his last 4 years. Ironically, an African who was assigned to care for him during his time treated him horribly, though Claver never complained. When news of his death, at the age of 74, on 8th of September 1654, reached the city, such big crowds of all kinds of people, I pray this will upload. Many seeking relics came to the church that soldiers had to be called on to protect his body. The Jesuits reckoned that in 40 years, Peter Claver baptized some 300,000 African slaves, a record unheard of in church history. When he and his old friend Brother Alphonsus were canonized on the same day in 1988, Pope Leo X111 said, "No life except the life of Christ has so moved me," it's making me cry, "as that of St. Peter Claver, a divine word." Memorable proverb for today. At the end of the day, it is not what you have or what you have accomplished. It is about what you have done with those accomplishments. It's about who you have lifted up, who you have made better. It is about what you have given back. And those actually are by a famous actor that I really admire and respect, Denzel Washington. So thank you so much for listening. I must stop now because it might not upload. It's gone to 17 minutes, but I did get one up the other day of 18. So God bless you and thank you for listening. I'm sorry, I'm very upset with what I've been reading. There's so many videos out there. You can find the truth out about how the slaves were treated, and it's abominable. Sad. We must pray for all those victims for all those years back, what they suffered.